Hello, friends. Hi, and welcome back to another episode of the Where You're Planted podcast. My name is Deborah. I'm your host, and I'm super delighted that you're able to tune into the episode today. If you're watching on Spotify or YouTube, or if you're just listening in through audio, thanks so much for being here. I'm super excited and happy to have you here listen to the episode. Right now it's March. We're getting into the month of March. We've turned back the hour or the clocks by 1 hour here at daylight savings time. I never know if it's like over or like just beginning. But the energy of spring is sort of coming upon us, and I'm looking outside my window now as I am recording this, and it's snowing, so it doesn't really even feel like spring is coming, but yeah, spring definitely is. But I figured that today's episode I would sit down and talk a little bit about discipline. And I'm not talking about like discipline in the way it's often portrayed on like social media, so like early morning 4 a.m. wake ups, even though I sort of do that, but that's for a different set of reasons. Not discipline in the form of like optimizing every data point or optimizing every single aspect of your life, and not even like extreme productivity routines. The kind of discipline that I'm sort of thinking about is a softer approach to discipline, which ultimately supports your life and supports you and your goals and objectives instead of it exhausting you. Because I feel like, as a lot of us spend so much time online, myself included, you get drawn into this framework or this mindset of seeing discipline, equating discipline to intensity. You've got to push yourself harder, work a little longer, do more, wake up earlier, etc. And that energy can be motivating in short bursts. It can help push through inertia, but oftentimes having that kind of energy be how you approach certain objectives or goals or whatever, it's just not going to be sustainable, plain and simple. And so a lot of us, myself included, burn out trying to adopt routines that do not work for our lifestyles or the kind of people that we are. And ultimately what that leads to is burnout. So today I sort of want to explore like a different approach, how to build healthy habits and routines that actually last without feeling like you're constantly failing at them or like falling off track and having to restart and get on the bandwagon again, essentially. So for a long time, I think I've sort of seen discipline as, and maybe other people too have seen discipline as a sort of like personal toughness, the ability to override your feelings and push through no matter what. It's sort of, framed in this sort of way in movies and popular media, where you see someone like, having a very strict, disciplined routine, and it often seems like they're pushing themselves hard and there's just no room for any sort of mistake. And I feel like this kind of skill and being that resilient and having that level of discipline can be useful. But when discipline becomes entirely about like force, a few things start to happen. Your routines are very fragile and rigid, and they can only occur when the conditions are perfect. When you're well rested, when your schedule is calm, when there are no disruptions to your schedule, when you feel motivated, and when everything happens as it should. But the reality is, as I'm sure you'll agree, is that life rarely gives us the perfect conditions. I'll use myself as like an example. I have always had this sort of idea in my mind in terms of like working out, for instance, that if I don't get my workout in first thing in the morning, I just will not be able to do it. And I've worked really hard over like the last year or so to not be so rigid about working out at a specific time of the day. And I mean, the reason that I don't like working out at any other time, I think I'm at my most energetic usually in the morning or like middle of the day. But if I left my workout to the end of the workday, I'm too tired and I'm less likely to do it. So this rigidity came from a well-intentioned place of me knowing myself well enough to know that if I don't do this first thing in the morning and get it over with, I am less likely to do it. However, what that meant was that there are just some times where I don't sleep well enough, and so I'm not well rested in the morning and I don't have the energy to go to the gym. And so that just means that rather than getting my workout in at a different point in the day, I just skip it entirely, because if I can't go in the morning, then I can't go at all, which is kind of crazy. But what I've been doing lately instead is just really switching my approach and my mindset to it. The time of day that I get a workout in does not matter. The goal always is to make sure that I get my workout in, no matter what, if it's scheduled for that day. And so oftentimes, if I can't, I might have the best of intentions to go first thing in the morning, get my workout in before work. But sometimes, and more often than not, I just did not have a good night's sleep. And so waking up is a lot harder. And however, with this like new mindset, I have given myself the grace to be able to, get a workout in over my lunch break and still feel like I've had a good workout and still be able to meet that goal and objective. And so when your habits are built on intensity instead of flexibility, the moment that something interrupts your routine, everything sort of crashes and burns and collapses, and there it goes. Second, discipline in the way that we've sort of come to understand it often creates a cycle of guilt. You start strong, you miss a few days, and then you feel like you've ruined the streak, again. And instead of like simply continuing, you feel like you have to start over. And again, it's because this like mindset of feeling like you have to meet certain goals or whatever at 100% intensity rather than working with yourself and meeting yourself where you're at. And so I think over time, this cycle of guilt and pattern of, stopping and restarting, trains us to associate habits with failure, right? And yeah, it just makes it so that we feel like hard things are insurmountable and difficult to do, where maybe it's just the problem is the way we've been approaching it has been wrong the entire time. And I feel like this is where the idea of a softer version of discipline comes in. And so this version of discipline is not, the absence of structure. I think the best way to sort of look at it is structure designed with compassion and realism. So this version of discipline, I feel like, asks us to really contemplate and think about a routine, a structure or whatever that we can maintain over years rather than at high intensity over a few short weeks. It prioritizes sustainability instead of perfection. So for instance, instead of committing to an hour-long workout every day, this version of discipline might look like 10 minutes of movement. And I'm saying this is an example for, say, if you're someone that has never really worked out and you're trying to get into your healthiest version of yourself, you could start as that rather than going all in and burning out pretty soon after. It could also be like, instead of like forcing yourself to cook elaborate healthy meals every night, it could just be finding 3 easy recipes that are yummy and tasty that you can kind of go back to when life gets a little crazy, so that when life does get crazy, which it will, you are not falling into unhealthy habits, because the structure of having to cook a healthy meal every night is unsustainable for a certain time of your life. But if you can like master a few good healthy recipes that you can make quickly and fall back to, it really can come in handy in terms of maintaining that discipline even when life gets life-in. And another practical example is like, instead of trying to do a complete financial overhaul overnight, you can commit to a small monthly savings targets as a way to start. It's something that you can do consistently. It doesn't require a lot of friction, but that just brings you one step closer toward achieving whatever your goal may be. I think this version of discipline really hones in on the fact that the goal is really not to impress anyone, because intense versions of discipline are really very impressive. But really the goal here is to build strong systems that can support you, that can support your life over time, regardless of the stage of life that you're in. And I feel like when habits are built this way, they're so much harder to break because they do not require an unrealistic demand of your energy. So I feel like one of the most powerful and effective ways to practice this version of discipline is through micro habits. Micro habits are really essentially tiny behaviors that are so small they feel almost insignificant. You really don't notice them. But like that's really what makes them so powerful and effective. Because when a habit is small enough, resistance disappears. You know, like reading 2 pages of a book a night, saving $10, automating $10 to be put into a savings account, doing 5 minutes of stretching. These are very minor things that individually don't seem that important, don't seem like they matter, but over time and with consistency, their effects will compound. And that's like the important thing, is consistency, is to be able to do them often and frequently. And the way you do them often and frequently is by making them small and insignificant enough that you can weave into your life and weave into your routine almost seamlessly. So I think the key idea here is that habits don't need to be dramatic for them to be transformative. They just need to be repeated. Another important piece of discipline in its like softest version is releasing the idea that habits must be executed perfectly. The truth is that perfectionism sabotages a lot of routines and habits, because perfectionism turns habits into like an all or nothing commitment. Like just going back to my early morning workout example, where it's like it's got to be done perfectly in the same way every single time, otherwise I don't do it at all. And that's like, honestly, you know, like candidly speaking, so foolish. It's such a foolish mindset and approach to take, but I feel like it's one that a lot of us unfortunately do. So, you know, like if your workout was not for a full hour, if you didn't sweat, if you didn't sweat during your workout, it does not count. If your meal was not perfectly healthy, that doesn't count. If you break your routine even once, the whole system, the whole process feels invalidated. But like real life is hardly ever streamlined, structured, and perfect. Real life is oftentimes messy. And our routines and our habits need to be able to shapeshift and adjust and adapt to the realities of living in a somewhat unpredictable world. You know, so yeah, sometimes you can only do a 45-minute workout, and that's good enough. It still counts. And so discipline in its like soft version really allows for variation. And with that variation, I think you also remove the sense of guilt that often accompanies the sense of perfection, which again, as I've talked about, leads you to repeat the cycle over and over again because you feel like you failed and you need to start again to make sure you get it perfectly right. So one of the most helpful questions I found that I try to ask myself whenever I'm building habits or routines is just asking whether this makes my life easier or a bit more difficult. And as someone that is, I don't consider myself lazy, but I can procrastinate. And if something is difficult to do or seems difficult to do, I often will not do it or not do it well. And so the reality is that good habits should reduce friction in your life and not increase it. And so they should be able to create stability and not constant pressure and feeling like, oh my God, I've got to do this. You know, if a habit requires you to be like motivated every single day, it needs to be rethought. One of the things that I've been taking my own advice. Oftentimes I really struggle in the past. I used to like really struggle in terms of figuring out like what I want to eat. I'm not the kind of person talking about like really trying to reduce resistance in my life. I don't cook every single night of the week or every single day. I really try to meal prep or cook once or twice a week and eat meals throughout the week. But sometimes I struggle to figure out like, okay, well, it's come to the end of the week. What am I going to eat for next week? And it used to be this like entire thing to just get myself to sit down and figure out what I'm going to eat. And that often led to me not eating as well as I should. But one thing I've been doing since the beginning of this year actually is, close to the end of the month or whatever, I sit down and I brainstorm everything that I want to I essentially meal plan for the month ahead. I think of breakfasts, I think of lunches, and I think of dinners. And I just have everything noted in like my master planner or whatever on my Notion. And that has been such a friction reducing habit in terms of meal planning and cooking for myself, because when the weekend goes around, I don't need to be like, oh my God, I need to figure out like what I need to eat. I already know what I'm going to need to eat for the coming week. And so grocery shopping is a significantly easier exercise compared to what it used to be before, because all I need to do is look at that meal plan for that week and it's like, oh, I need to get this. I already have this at home. And so it's just so much more straightforward, and the resistance to eating well, the friction to eating good food has just been dramatically reduced. Sustainable habits tend to share a few characteristics. They're simple, they're adaptable, and most importantly, they align with the person that you're trying to become, and not the idealized version of yourself that you feel like you need to be based on someone else's like version of productivity, which is honestly more likely than not dramatized for social media. So to just kind of like wrap all of this up with a nice pretty bow, taking a softer approach to discipline is really not about reducing your standards. It's about choosing systems and structures that allow you to stay consistent without constantly exhausting yourself. This idea of discipline recognizes that meaningful progress usually does not occur over short bursts of intensity. Meaningful progress really does happen through small, steady actions repeated over time. And so if your routines have felt overwhelming lately, maybe the solution isn't to double down and try harder, be more intense, or even be hard on yourself. Maybe the solution is to try and soften the structure and the systems. Simplify the habit if you can, reduce the pressure, and try as much as you can to focus on continuity instead of perfection. Because, like I said, the most powerful, sustainable routines are rarely the dramatic, energy-sucking ones. And they are the quiet habits that truly can support your life over years. And those habits are often built with a little more patience. So yeah, that, my friends, is all I have to share for today's episode. Thank you so much for spending the last 20-something minutes with me. I hope you've enjoyed this episode and you've taken a little bit of something from it. We're always a work in progress. I mean, like, I'm not perfect at this discipline thing too. I'm still trying to incorporate aspects of self-discipline into my life here and there, but for the most part, it's just a realization that my routines and systems need to work for my life, and I can't like transform my life, but I can't make my life fit into a certain system, if that makes sense. And really, that's like all I'm trying to share in this episode. So I hope you've taken something away from it. Thank you so much for being here. Make sure to connect with me and reach out to me on all of my social media platforms. I will have them linked in the show notes. If you're watching on YouTube, please make sure to subscribe. Let's try and grow the YouTube channel. But that's pretty much everything that I have to share for today. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you, and I can't wait to talk to you next time on another episode. But until then, take care and goodbye.